We're starting from where we left off yesterday, when Nick and Daisy are sitting on the porch alone, and Daisy is confessing that she really doesn't feel very positive about the world, that she feels like the world is not necessarily a good place. And then she says something really interesting that we didn't talk about yesterday. When she finds out that she has given birth to a girl, she says, "I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool." That's a really interesting thing to say. A fool back in the 1920s probably meant someone who was kind of silly, who didn't really think very deep or serious thoughts, who maybe was very rich, kind of empty. What Daisy is saying here is she's kind of projecting a little bit about what she thinks she is onto her daughter. She thinks she might be a fool, someone who's just empty and rich, does whatever her husband tells her to do. All right, so we're going to start from right here. She says sophisticated. God, I'm sophisticated. Inside, the crimson room bloomed with light. Tom and Miss Baker sat at either end of the long couch, and she read aloud to him from the Saturday Evening Post. That was a magazine in the 20s. The words running together in a soothing tune. The lamplight, bright on his boots and dull on the autumn leaf yellow of her hair, glinted along the paper as she turned a page with a flutter of slender muscles in her arm. When we came in, she held us silent for a moment with a lifted hand. "To be continued," Jordan said, tossing the magazine on the table, "in our very next issue." Her body asserted itself with a restless movement of her knee, and she stood up. 10 o'clock, she remarked, apparently finding the time on the ceiling. Time for this good girl to go to bed. "Jordan's going to play in the golf tournament tomorrow," explained Daisy, "over at Westchester." "Good night, Mr. Carraway. I'll see you tomorrow." "Of course you will," confirmed Daisy. "In fact, I'll arrange a marriage. Come over often, Nick, and I'll sort of, fling you and Jordan together, lock you up accidentally in linen closets and push you out to sea in a boat, all that sort of thing." Meaning, I'm going to try and fix you and Mrs. Baker up on a date. "Good night," called Mrs. Baker from the stairs. "I haven't heard a word." A few minutes later, I got up to go home. They came to the door with me and stood side by side in a cheerful square of light. As I started my motor, Daisy called, "Wait! I forgot to ask you something, and it's important. We heard you were engaged to a girl out west." "That's right," corroborated Tom kindly. "We heard you were engaged." "It's not true. I'm too poor." "But we heard it," insisted Daisy, surprising me by opening up again in a flower-like way. "We heard it from 3 people, so it must be true." Of course I knew what they were referring to, but I wasn't even vaguely engaged. Too much gossip was one of the reasons I had come east. You can't stop going with an old friend on account of rumors, and on the other hand, I had no intention of being rumored into marriage. Their interest rather touched me and made them less remotely rich. Nevertheless, I was confused and a little disgusted as I drove away. Already it was deep summer on the roadhouse roofs and in front of wayside garages where new red gas pumps sat out in pools of light, and when I reached my estate at West Egg, I ran the car under its shed and sat for a while on an abandoned grass roller in the yard. The wind had blown off, leaving a loud, bright night, with wings beating in the trees and a persistent organ sound of the full bellows of the earth blew the frogs full of life. The silhouette of a moving cat wavered across the moonlight, and turning my head to watch it, I saw that I was not alone. 50 feet away, a figure had emerged from the shadow of my neighbor's mansion and was standing with his hands in his pockets, regarding the silver pepper of the stars. Something in his leisurely movements and the secure position of his feet upon the lawn suggested that it was Mr. Gatsby himself, come out to determine what share was his of our local heavens. So while Nick is standing outside looking at the stars in his yard, he notices, just a little bit away, Mr. Gatsby has come out, and he's also standing by the water looking out, looking up, looking out. He's got his hands in his pockets, and just by the way he moves, so confident and cool, Nick assumes it's Mr. Gatsby. I decided to call to him. Miss Baker had mentioned him at dinner, and that would do for an introduction. But I didn't call to him, for he gave a sudden intimation or hint that he was content to be alone. He stretched out his arms toward the dark water in a curious way, and far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily, I glanced seaward, and distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away, that must have been the end of a dock. When I looked once more for Gatsby, he had vanished, and I was alone again in the unquiet darkness. So as we end our chapter here, it's something really interesting. Gatsby is standing at the water's edge, and he lifts his arm up as though he's reaching out for something across the water. And what Nick realizes he seems to be reaching for is there's this green light at the other side of the bay. And the green light is probably on the end of a dock, and it looks like Mr. Gatsby is reaching out for that green light. So remember the way that West Egg and East Egg are situated. They're two sort of egg-shaped curves in the island that are right across from one another. So it's likely that the green light at the end of a dock is coming from a dock over in East Egg. So that's something to think about.